And so underneath all of the minds, thinking and imaginings of what is important, there is a silence, there is a stillness that has never ever moved, never changed, and continues to be an undisturbable peace, an open field of awareness that just is. Before the play and appearance of world, before mind, before everything that mind imagines, is a peace, a silence of being that is the true essence nature of all beings. And the purpose of a human life is to discover this unmovable truth before everything, in the midst of the possibility of being incredibly distracted. It is the invitation to find out what is real, find out what is truly important, to find out who you truly are, and to realize that the play of the world and all experience is completely irrelevant. And in a way, if there were a test, it is a test to see whether there is the ability within the consciousness to discern what is real and true and what is just appearance and surface and total distraction. Because everything that we imagine is important is actually irrelevant. The only importance is the knowing of yourself. The mind imagines that it has all this time, but there is no time. There is just a timeless knowing of this truth. It is not to put off what the mind imagines it can do tomorrow, because this is not a doing. This is not something that we put on the list and the mind decides when it is ready for freedom. It is about recognizing that inside there is a fire burning, and that can be overlooked by the pull of distraction, the pull of desires being seemingly met in the play of the world. And in a way, it is a test. It is a test to see whether the consciousness is ready, ripe, mature enough to recognize what is real and true. What is real and true is that you are free and you have always been free. What is true is that you belong to God, that there is only God, there is only one divinity, and everything arises in appearance out of this and dissolves into this in complete and utter surrender in this moment, here now. There is only this moment, here now. And so there is nothing to understand, nothing to get. There is nothing here for the mind. This is for consciousness to recognize and remember the resonance of its true nature, to recognize and remember the great glory that is the freedom, that is the light, that is the joy, the happiness, the perfect love that is so deeply longed for in every heart. And that what is longed for in every heart, it is not what is longed for that is important. It is the longing itself that is important. Because the longing itself without interpretation, the longing itself without a focused, imagined object of desire, the longing itself is the means to carry the consciousness deep into its own self in order to remember that what you are is consciousness. And so these words come: consciousness speaking to consciousness, the self speaking to itself, the constant invitation of consciousness to invite itself to remember the true essence nature and to open into the fullness and beauty of true nature, into the remembering of being, the remembering of simply being, that there is nothing that needs to be taken care of. Life just lives itself, and you are the life that is living itself. But without knowing that, there will be a constant distraction and imagining, I can plan my life and create my life, and I want my life to be like this, and these are mine and they're not yours, they're mine and they're not yours, and a constant bantering within the mind's functioning that is self-concerned, self-obsessed, we could even say, absolutely and only concerned with itself, but its concern with its own survival, we have to discover, is a protection. It's a protective mechanism. It is a mechanism that has been learned and is conditioned, and it is everything that keeps us from what is real and true. So we have to see that where there is a mind that is trying to protect and control and guard, it is a protection that the mind thinks is necessary, but it is protecting from everything that we are longing for. What we are longing for is to remember our belonging to God. We are longing to remember and to be resting in the depths of the oneness with the great glory. It is the only thing that any being is longing for, whether it is known or not. It is still the truth that it is all that is longed for by every being. And so there is a certain incredible grace when the life reaches a point where we can actually have a sense that what is longed for is close. In truth, it is closer than close. There is already an intimacy because you already are what is longed for. Of course, this can never be understood with the mind, that what is longed for beyond anything, you already are. And so there has to be a different way than the learned, conditioned way to discover this truth. And we cannot discover this truth with the mind. We cannot find it in the external. We can only find this truth in the silence of being, in the silence of the heart that is ever wide and open in its infinite, timeless, and boundless nature, that we are already free, already whole, already one with the one, and everything is conspiring to invite us to come into the deepest possible remembrance. So we do not come into remembrance by focusing upon the play. We do not come into remembrance by focusing on the objects of experience and the content of the life. We come into the remembering by ensuring that the focus is constantly with the being, just simply being the aware presence of being that just simply is. The felt sense of the being is the felt sense of being here now. Simple existence, the I am presence that just is. There is only one I am presence, and the I am presence is the same I am presence of all beings, including the divine. It is the same presence. It is not a fragmented or divided presence. It is one whole presence, and all beings belong to this one presence. So as we come to the felt sense of simply being, the invitation of consciousness is to just be here, to let go of all that is not relevant. And what is not relevant is anything and everything that awareness is aware of. To just be here as the aware being, aware of the moving, changing, and yet resting, focused in being the aware being that is watching. Because resting as the aware being, as the aware presence, and just watching, it is this invitation to really recognize the independence of the presence of being, because the presence of being is a witnessing presence, and it is aware of the moving, changing. But the more the focus is with being the witnessing presence that is aware of the moving, changing, the more the deep recognition within consciousness of its own independence from the content of experience starts to be known. And the glory is that it does not need to be understood with the mind in any way. It is really a direct experience that can only be confirmed in the directness of being here. So being here and the felt sense of being the aware being that is aware of the moving, changing, aware of thoughts that come and go, aware of body sensations, tensions, aware of sense perception, aware of the environment, aware of all that is moving and changing, and a recognition that as the awareness, there is the ability to watch the moving, changing, and yet to notice that as the aware being, you are not moving and changing, that you are still silent openness, that you are free and completely independent of what is moving and changing. Mm. Mm. That you are here now, and there is something so simple and profound to just being here now. A relaxation to just be as you are, open, free, fresh, simple. Nothing needs to happen. Does not need to be an adjusting or a stopping of the mind. It is just to be aware of mind, just to be aware of mind. Be aware of the thoughts that come and go. Just to be aware. Mm. as there is an awareness of just being and an awareness of watching the moving, changing. The felt sense in the being is of the independence from the play, a direct experience of noticing that what I am as the aware being that is ever present is not touched or moved in any way by the ever-changing landscape of experience. A recognition that what I am is the stillness, is the peace, is the openness. And as there is a recognition in this way, the consciousness is being conscious of itself. And in being conscious of itself, there is a pull into itself. And the pull into itself is the pull to know itself. And so the focus of awareness starts to shift from being aware of the objects of distraction, being aware of the objects of experience, and the awareness starts to be aware of itself being aware. Awareness starts to recognize that it is aware of itself, just simply being. And as awareness is aware of itself, simply being, there is a deepening that can feel like a greater openness or a greater expansion. A recognition that what I am is the stillness. I am the stillness. I am the openness. I am not the person. I am not the mind or the moving pieces. I am not the story. I am the stillness. I am the still, silent presence. And here I am free. I am freedom. And as freedom, what I am is infinite and unbounded and ever free, openness with no boundaries, no edges, no containment at all, that I am ever free. And it takes for there to be a pull into the longing to know yourself. It takes for there to be a pull to know yourself and to know this freedom, to know God, to know love more than there is a pull to perpetuate the story and satisfy the me and the me's desires, to have more experiences and to play out the way that the me is programmed to need to be seen, need to be wanted, need to be included, to try to find belonging in the world. It takes for the play to oftentimes bring in some kind of disappointment in order to recognize that there is something so much more profound that is calling, and that no experience, however interesting or enjoyable, pleasurable for the mind, there comes a point where pleasure just won't do anymore, because the longing for causeless eternal happiness that is the true nature, the delight, the joy, the awe, the wonder, the perfect love, is all that will satisfy, because there is such a longing of the heart and a recognizing that pleasure and transient experiences just don't meet that longing to feel whole, that the transient, temporary experiences that the mind so longs for and loves to talk about, that they become so completely irrelevant because pleasure is temporary, and at some point pleasure will be replaced in the play of the cause and effect, will be replaced by some kind of disappointment. And so in a way, the life is all about trying to find more pleasure, trying to create more experiences. And at some point it just becomes unfulfilling, unsatisfying, because it is recognized in its transient, temporary nature to not really ever fulfill the longing that is the deep fire of longing for God, because can only fulfill this longing through the knowing of true nature, of the knowing of your own wholeness, and the release from the projected world that the mind is constantly creating. So the mind is creating a projected world because of its feeling of lack. Out of its feeling of lack, of something missing, it's constantly projecting a world, trying to get rid of its sense of lack, its sense of shame, guilt, something missing, not enough. And it will perpetuate this projected world until the grace brings in the illuminated pointing that allows there to be a clear seeing of how constantly the cycle cycles around from pleasure to pain, from pleasure and exciting experiences to disappointment, or just being right back here in the feeling of lack, the feeling of not being enough, and how the urge to just find another way to satiate the mind is eventually it's seen that it just doesn't work, that you can create whatever the mind wants to create in its projection, and it will never be enough. You could have everything that you think you are longing for, but the mind will always find something else to want, because it is a wanting machine. It is programmed deep within the condition to never ever feel satiated, to never feel enough, because it is emerging through a filter of a sense of separation. It's emerging and creating its appearance through a filter that says you are not enough, you are broken, you are somehow lacking, and you should be ashamed of yourself, and you should feel guilty for that. And so the mind just keeps searching for a way to try to push away those deep feelings. And really, in truth, there's a misunderstanding, because the deep feeling is actually the deep sense of being separated from God, from the divine wholeness, from purity, because there's a belief that I am not pure, I am not whole. And as long as that belief is believed, it will perpetuate, it will keep believing itself and perpetuating itself in order to keep itself alive and keep itself seeking within its projected world, which is a limited context. It searches only through what it knows. And it's afraid of the unknown. But this truth can only be discovered in the unknown, because the mind can never know this. And so only when there is enough disappointment and hopelessness in the dream, do we come to a sense where we're really ready to heed the call, the deep call of the divine that is inviting a clear seeing and a clear knowing of what is true. That you are the living truth. You are the living happiness. You are the living glory. You are the perfect love. You are everything, everything that is longed for. But it's not in the mind. It's before the mind. And the way to come to the remembering of this freedom is to rest before the mind and to have the vigilance, the courage, and the pull, the alive recognition of the longing to remain here and not follow the constant distractions of the mind. But that maturing happens as consciousness itself matures. But in a way, we are tested, and the being tested is this constant barrage of the mind's meanderings. And the test is, will you listen to the mind? Will you believe the mind? Will you follow what the mind is telling itself? Or will you rest as the awareness of it and see that everything that the mind says is a belief in its own limitation, and none of it is true? Nothing that the mind says is true. Nothing that the mind says needs to happen. Nothing that the mind believes in is the actual truth. The only truth is a truth that can be proven in the direct experience of being. And this is the glory. How fooled we have been. What a great cosmic joke it is. Because the actual truth can be proven right now. The actual truth of who you are can be proven. It can be proven in direct experience. It's not something that the mind understands, and it's not within the realm of limitation, but it can be proven in direct experience. And we are only to trust what can be proven and to not trust the mind and the thoughts and the thinking, to not trust anything that is limited, anything that is moving and changing, that we don't trust anything that is not ever present and stable, still and constant, that we only trust the constant stillness and presence of being, because it's the only proven direct experience. So if we are to only trust what is proven and to not trust the mind, then the great recognition is right here. And it's not transient, it's not temporary. And yet the habit and the instinct to go back to the mind again and again is going to perpetuate until the pull to know the freedom and to live this freedom, to live in the glorious love of God, is greater than to live in the misery of the me and the mine that is all about protection and control. And it's this willingness to see the mechanisms of control, to see the mechanisms of protection and not follow them again and again and again. To know that the mechanisms of protection and control will perpetuate. And there's not really any point trying to process your way through it, because processing your way through it is just another way that the mind satisfies itself. It loves to indulge in itself. It's a self-indulgent functioning mechanism, and it loves to indulge thinking about itself. But that kind of processing is just another distraction. The only way to process your way out of that habituated functioning of the psychological mind is to come to the presence of being and just rest. Recognize indirect experience that the being is untouched and undisturbed by anything that is happening in the mind, however strong and powerful it feels. To confirm, is the being touched? Is the being disturbed? Is the being angry, sad, anxious, upset? And to recognize, no, it's not. The being is just here. And to let the attention fall into the being. What is happening in the being? What can you prove? What is true in this moment? Can you feel how you are the being? Otherwise, how do you know that the being is ever free and untouched? How can you know this unless you are it? Cannot be known, and only directly, cannot be known by the mind. So there's this incredible, glorious possibility to know yourself, and then to see how quickly and how constantly the mind moves to distract. And that if you believe the mind and you get pulled by what the mind thinks it needs, then there will just be a constant being pulled in, like being a wave that's being tossed around on the shore, completely missing the great glorious truth that as a wave you are water and you are one with the ocean of bliss, that you can either believe you are a wave being tossed around on the shore and that you're just a victim to the play of life and the whim of the weather and the dance of the ebbs and flows of life. You can play out and pretend you are a victim for as long as that is compelling. Or you can recognize, what am I? What am I in essence? I am water. I am consciousness. I am one with the great ocean. Yes, there is a movement of the wave washing up on the shore and being dragged back in. But as the consciousness recognizes its essence nature, the pull into the great depths gets deeper. And the consciousness starts to recognize, oh, if I don't perpetually engage in this victim story, I'm being washed on the shore, I'm being washed on the shore, I'm being bashed around into the rocks, and focusing upon, I'd like to make a different pathway. I'd like for my waveliness to wash up on the beach instead of the rocks. So I'll plan a vacation so I can wash up on the beach instead of the rocks. I'll plan to be a rock pool for a little while. But what if you stop planning to be a somebody that's going somewhere and you just fall into the depths of your essence and you feel that draw of the ocean, that you could fear you are drowning because you're being pulled out. You're being pulled out into the depths of the ocean, away from the shore, away from the land, away from the drama. You're being pulled out and you fear you will not survive. You will not be able to float or swim. But what if there's a greater wisdom that's pulling you into yourself, saturating you until you drown in the glory of your true nature? What if there is a wisdom, an intelligence that is greater? And if you let yourself be carried by the pull, the draw of that greater, that you may find yourself in the depths the deep silent depths of your being, and you might forget the story of the poor little wave that doesn't ever get what it wants. You might realize your essence nature deep in the silent depths and find out that you are eternal life. And even if you drown through saturation into your essence nature, that you have never been more vibrantly alive. You have never been more free, because you are true and you're not acting out, being a character on the stage that is constantly being washed onto the shore and feeling less than, separated from, poor me, how hard it is, how I never ever get what I am longing for. But what if, to get what you are longing for, you have to give up your waveliness and your desires for the next experience, that you have to let go of imagining all the possibilities. Oh, I could wash up on a really gorgeous beach, or I could get to be really clear somewhere where the water is clear. I could get there. I could find a way to be somewhere else that's more beautiful, where there isn't so much seaweed and there aren't so many rocks and barnacles, right? I could find myself, maybe I could find myself in a little tide pool with the company of a couple of lovely starfish and a few friendly crabs, and I could just stay here, just happy and peaceful. But then what happens? The tides change and the waves crash again, and you're pulled out of your happy little stagnant sanctuary, and you're called by the call of the great big, pulling you back out of the tide pool, and you're being pulled in, and you have no control in truth over where you reside, but you're being invited to recognize, what is your essence nature? Let go of being identified and trying to plan your future and find lots of lovely things to do. Let go of your waveliness and actually be the ocean, be the deep silent depths, be pulled into the current, the strong currents of your longing, and be carried in to the deep silent depths. Recognize your true nature. Let go of trying to fight against the currents and the natural intelligence of life, and be carried into the deep, silent, glorious depths of being yourself, and discover the blissful, radiant truth of who you are. Let go. Let go of imagining that you're somehow thirsting for water, that you're somehow hungry for this truth, and recognize that you are fully satiated. You are absolutely drenched. There's nothing to hunger for, because you are full and whole and complete and perfect in the love of God. It is just to love God more than you love the me and the mine and all that you imagine is yours. Love God more. Be willing to let it all go, as if you could walk right out of your life right now. Walk right in to the ocean and keep walking all the way into the love of God, into the deep embrace of your true belonging. And that this happens not in the pictures of the ocean, the beach, the tide pool, the rocks. It doesn't happen in the appearance. It happens in the presence of being, just to be yourself. Be here now and make being here more important than anything else. To be so present that presence is just called into itself so fully, so wholly, that you start to recognize the holiness of this moment is the aliveness of your knowing that just is simply being. Being yourself, just being here, ever free, ever fresh, just being yourself, being the true one, the free one, the openness, the one that is ever free. To feel the resonance of the silence, the stillness, the presence of being. To feel the deep resonance where the remembering is alive as a frequency, as the vibration, as light that is already illuminated. It is to feel the resonance, to find the lightness of being, because the lightness of being, the light, is what is guiding the consciousness into its own purity. To find the light is to find the resonance. To find the resonance is to find the knowing that knows, and that the knowing that knows has this aliveness, this alive resonance. It's a frequency, a vibration, and the frequency, this vibration is light. It's a resonant light. And to be here in the resonant light of your own knowing is really where the Satguru, the light of true guidance is resting. And this is where the light of your own knowing, your own consciousness carries itself into itself, carries itself deeper into the remembering of what is true and real. The more there is a resting here in the resonant light of being, recognizing the frequency, the luminous frequency. In a way, this luminant frequency is your nervous system. It's recognizing the aliveness of your nervous system when it is not charged and triggered with story, when it is free and open and expansive. It is pure consciousness. And we have to come to the silent presence for the nervous system to be pure, still, and not in the busy frequency of the mind consciousness that's constantly moving. We have to come to the pure, still silence that is underneath the mind consciousness, because in the mind consciousness, we cannot find the light, right? It gets called ignorance or a darkness, because the light cannot be found there. So we have to find the light because we are light, right? So we have to come to the light, the frequency of the being that is light, to the nervous system that is light. It's light consciousness, it's pure illumined consciousness. Only by discovering the light can we be carried by the luminosity and the radiance of our true nature deeper into these silent depths of luminous divine wholeness. We have to find the light. So we are bringing the fine frequency. Through the speaking, we are bringing the fine frequency so that the consciousness that is already here in the knowing of itself can be pulled into itself, and the recognition of its true light frequency, instead of just cycling in the flow of the mind consciousness that is this ignorance where the light cannot be found. The light cannot be found. We have to come to a finer frequency. We come to this frequency by resting in the being and feeling the felt sense of the stillness, the silence of being. There is illumination here, and in the illumination, a felt sense of remembering. The mind consciousness has to still, has to slow down, quieten, and it will only naturally slow down and quieten when there is a precedent set, and the precedent gets set through resting in the being. So when we can recognize the felt sense of being, the felt sense of presence, it sets a precedent for the mind consciousness, the whirring, moving, busier frequency to naturally be pulled, magnetically pulled to itself. It gets magnetically pulled to itself because there is a natural flow of surrender happening in all consciousness. And there is a flow of surrender naturally happening even in the consciousness that plays as mind consciousness. And yet what happens is that natural flow to surrender into itself gets interrupted by the conditioned patterns to protect. So the natural flow to surrender gets interrupted by a habit to protect, a habit to resist. And that's why we have to illuminate the habit to protect and resist. It's like illuminating that there's a dam in the way, right? That there's something been built that's stopping the flow. It's illuminating the patterns and the holding patterns of consciousness that play as discordance. And those holding patterns are creating an appearance of a life that is limited. And in order to free the limitation, we have to rest in the recognition, the direct recognition of being the unlimited. And so as the unlimited, we can open into the remembering of the impersonal unlimited, and we can discover and remember the frequency of light that illuminates, the frequency of light that melts and dissolves the illusion of separation. We have to find the light that we are, the light of the being that is resonating at a finer frequency in order to illuminate all of the holding patterns that play as resistance and contraction and control and protection, so that we can illuminate them. And of course, we have to illuminate the holding patterns that want to keep the holding patterns in place. It's a thick, dense layering of protection. And so the more that we rest in this principle of light, of being the light, and illuminate everything that is moving and changing, everything that's a belief, everything that's a concept, everything that's a conditioned protection, all control, all resistance, all judgment, all opinion. We just keep illuminating in order to release the seemingly personal patterning of limitation and open more into the remembering of being the unlimited vastness, that we open more into the resonant light frequencies of being what we are before we imagined that we was someone, right? So consciousness has got itself stuck in a little tide pool of comfort and is imagining, oh, I'm this person, this is my life. Everything here in my life is important. All my little friends, all my little family, all my things, my house, my car, my clothes, my stuff, all of my things. Everything's really important to me. And I've got to keep it very safe and protected, right? But when we start to open to these finer frequencies, we recognize that none of that is important. The willingness just to let it all go and to find out a simplicity, discover a simplicity when we let it all go, when we recognize that we are being bound by our attachments to our things and our lives and the me in every way. Who are you without any of that? Who are you if the house burnt down? Who are you if you lost everything? What remains? And this is the truth. This is the glorious truth. Who are you without any of that stuff that you think is so important? What are you in truth? Without a thought, without a story, without a belief, without a concept. If we press the delete button on the archive, the memory, my story, my past, my life, the things that have happened to me, what if we just press delete in this moment? Who are you? What are you? You're just here now, right? You don't own anything. There might be some stuff around you, but who cares, right? Who cares? Who are you without the tendrils of attachment of mine, 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 mine? Who are you without any of that? Who are you in the glorious light of God? Who are you resting in the heart of God, in the love of God, in the perfect love that is everything you have longed for? Who are you and what else do you need, right? Who are you in the light and the love of the divine wholeness? Who are you? Who are you? You know, this is where we just let go and we let God. We're not trying to hang on to anything for the me. We're not trying to control anything. We're just allowing within the love of God, there's a trust, a knowing that everything that is needed in this perpetual surrender of God into God is provided. And how that looks in the sense of the life is that we're provided for. Everything that we need is given to us. And if we don't have it, then we don't need it, right? And if it brings a sense of, well, you have to adapt and find a way, then that's part of the unfolding. If you don't have it, you don't need it. We're so adaptable in truth, and things can be so simple in truth. We imagine that we need all of these things, but in truth, we don't need anything. The only thing that we truly need is the sustenance of the knowing of our true nature. You know, the reason that there's so much stress and anxiety and upset, health issues on every level, emotional, mental health, physical health, all of this in the appearance of the collective consciousness is because of the separation from God, right? It's the absolute starvation. Let's say it's a deep, deep divine starvation. That's what's happening in the collective consciousness, is there's such a greed for things, such a greed for power, such a lust that is being followed. And of course, it's innocent in so many ways, because the knowing of it isn't there, and the ignorance is just that dense frequency is just flowing within itself, and it can't find the light. It's trying to, but it only imagines that it can find in the world of things. And truly, what it is like it's like the starvation of humanity, right? Humanity's in a complete starvation, and it's trying to nourish itself with things and more things, and it's actually starving itself more by its addiction to things and consuming things that are absolutely not nourishing. What is really the only nourishment that can really feed and deeply nourish the starvation is to open to what the true longing is for, open to love, open to where the true nourishment is. And there's so much protection. There's even a blocking of true love, right? And that's why there's so much fear and stress and anxiety, is because of that feeling of separation. It's what separation is. It's a deep fear that I am alone. And of course, this brings like a loneliness and a feeling of lack and not enough. And of course, that is the great misunderstanding. And only when we open to knowing this perfect love, this light, this resonance through the presence of being, can we be humbled out of everything that we have learned and how we're trying to, in the collective, nourish with poison. We're trying to nourish with poison, right? Mm. Mm. The poison is being carried back, right? And perpetuating itself. Stacking it up, stacking up the poison, right? It's like mice or rats, where they collect the poison and they create a great big stash of it. In a way, that's what humanity is doing, right? It's creating a great big stack of poison and imagining that it's rich and abundant and that it's got everything, but it's absolutely starving for the love of God. And so the great glory is that when we come to a maturity in consciousness that can recognize what this longing is for, and that we stop moving that longing to the external, and we stop stacking up poison, right? That we actually start allowing the longing to be the opening of the heart, that we start weeping for God instead of weeping for things, right? We start weeping for freedom, for this truth, rather than weeping for, the things in life that we don't get, that don't go our way, that our weeping is like this longing that says, show me, take me home, carry me all the way into you. Let me know this truth where none of this nonsense is important, where nothing matters, right? And, here, it's not that we don't have things. There's still things. There's still things. There are still things. We have what we need. We have what we need. We don't care if it all disappears, right? So it's not what the mind imagines. It's not at all what the mind imagines, but it's this constant invitation to turn to the light, right? If you're longing for the light and the warmth and the glory and love of God, stand with your face to the sun as much as you can, right? Why hang around in the shadows, lurking in the shadows, only coming out at night if all you long for is the sun, right? If all you long for is the glory, then rest in the being, rest in the glory. Stop the craziness, stop the insanity of only coming out at night and lurking around in the shadows, planning your next adventure, right? Rest in the glory, rest in the luminous glory, and sing Alleluia. It's here. Jai, Jai, Jai. Right? Rest in this constant flow of bliss, this constant flow of remembering. Here I am, 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 freedom. Here I am, freedom. Here I am, freedom. And then watch as the body moves in the life. But just be completely unattached. It's like be the aware being that's watching and have the openness, the wideness to watch as if you're watching a movie of someone's life. It's not your life. It's a character. Watch the character. You're not the character. Just watch it. The more you can just watch the character without being identified, the more you can illuminate the habits of the character that keep the sense of bondage in place, the sense of limitation in place. So, good morning, sunshine. Welcome, welcome. Bright, luminous, light of divine wholeness. Welcome, brilliance of the radiant heart. Welcome, the vast open wideness of true, perfect love. Welcome, welcome home to yourself. Welcome, welcome to the luminous light, the light that is shining the way through the resonance of knowing, through the resonance of knowing. Rest here in the luminous brilliance of your own guidance, your own connection to source. Here is Guru, right? Don't need one outside in the play of the world. You've got your own Sat, true Sat, Guru inside, the light of your own knowing, the light that knows this truth, right? Let us meet here in Guru. Let us meet here in the resonant light and glory of perfect love. Let us be here together where we have left our puppets on the surface and we are here in the remembering of what we are in truth. We can see that the puppets are being animated by the vital life force. Can see. And yet the knowing of the heart is that you never move, that you are ever present. You are never ever changing. You are aware of the moving, changing, and ever deepening, ever refining into the glorious remembering of the one that you are, that there is only this one, and you are that. You are the one that always is. Resting here as the silent being, aware of the character, and yet in the knowing of yourself, in the knowing of yourself. The knowing is a frequency, a resonant frequency of light. It is life itself. It's the vitality of life itself. And to rest here in the knowing, the true knowing, where the illumination of everything is happening. This is the source, light, and it is illuminating everything that seems to be moving and changing, and bringing all the discordant patterns of consciousness into the remembering of pure consciousness, so that even this source light can fall into its own source, which is wholeness, right? That at some point it is so drenched within remembering of its own wholeness that the oneness that knows no other falls into itself, the principle of illumination, the divine light that is ever whole. This is the truth of who you are, and this truth is already here, ever shining, brilliant, luminous, resonant light. There's no one here, no one here. You are here. You are not who you thought you were. You are not the person, you are not the character. You are the light, the being, the simple openness that is immaculate and free. And the knowing knows. The knowing knows. And the knowing itself is the pure knowledge, the intelligence, the flow of intelligence, of pure consciousness flowing within itself to refine and know itself in and as everything. Remembering, remember, remember, remember. Mm. Mm. So resting here,